Hello and welcome to Pots and Trowels with me, Sean and Jill.
Hi.
Hi.
And this week I'm going to be talking to a legend from horticulture, Jon Wheatley, about his life and his amazing career.
We're talking gardening behind bars. That doesn't mean John's been in prison. And we're also answering a question on fruit bushes. And remember, if you've got a question, drop us an email, info@potsandtrowels.com.
And then Martin's got some jobs for us to be getting on with in the garden, still that autumn tidy up, but also how to keep an eye on your houseplants and keeping them healthy, even though the heating's going on in the house and winter's on its way. But first, let's hear about Jon and how he started in his career in horticulture.
Well, it was a family thing. Met Grandad on the allotment. I think that's the key thing. So many people in gardening get into it through meeting Grandad or Grandmum on the allotment.
Yeah.
And going around the shows as I've done all my career, the number of people say, well, my Grandad used to grow dahlias. Well, my Grandad grew dahlias. And that's what got my mother involved and my father involved. And they were both great flower arrangers. I did the flower arrangement bit. And then I suppose really I was inspired by a teacher at school, a Mr. Guard, who said, Jon, you've got to go into horticulture. And I was always involved in plant propagation. I've loved sowing seeds. And I think that's one of the other key things that I say to any young person nowadays. Sow a few seeds, you'll get hooked.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to grow.
It's true, and I think it's interesting that your school teacher sort of suggested you go into horticulture, because you get so many stories of people saying, you know, I was talking to somebody yesterday and they wanted to go into horticulture, but their teacher advised them against it, and that's exactly what happened to me. I was advised against it, but I decided to not take their advice.
I've heard this so often, the number of people that have said you're too bright to go into gardening. But I'll tell you what, in terms of lifestyle, in terms of health, I think the only reason I'm around today is because I got involved in gardening.
Yeah.
Because there's something new every day. And my best tip to any young person, if you can get paid for doing something that you're interested in and love, then that's the secret to good employment. But it's also the secret to good life.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's a wonderful lifestyle if you can work in horticulture or gardening. So what was your sort of first paid job upon leaving school then?
Well, my first paid job, I went to an agricultural school, a farm school, and I did things like GCSE in agricultural science, and I didn't do horticulture. They didn't offer a horticultural GCSE, but other countries in the world do. And I think one of the worst things that ever happened was taking away rural science. But my first job, in answer to your question, was at a teacher's training college, which is now Bath College, and I was there instructing. Once I'd done a commercial course at Cannington College, I went straight there and I was teaching rural science teachers to grow plants.
Oh, right.
And of course, what's great about that is that all of those rural science teachers went all around the country and they were teaching children to sow seeds, which comes back to my theme for this talk, which is, you know, if you sow seeds, you're there.
Yeah.
And that was my first job. And then I always wanted to go to RHS Wisley. Always been a great lover of plants. And I went to Wisley from then, having done 2 years as a plant propagator for the Parks Department in Bristol. They gave me free rein. I went around every park in the city and I made notes. Keep a diary. If you're getting involved in horticulture, keep a diary. I still look at those notes from 60 years ago of the various plants that I learnt the names of and sowed seeds and propagated them.
And being a student at Wisley must have been a fantastic thing, you know, because that is the garden, is it, to train in?
Well, hopefully my southwest accent doesn't come across in this interview, but when I got to Wisley and I was ribbed by some of these guys who were brilliant. In those days, shows how the RHS has come on, because you had to be 21, unmarried and male to be a Wisley student.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's all changed now for the better. And I got ribbed with a Somerset accent and I couldn't pronounce my plant names, and people like Roy Lancaster, we'd go and meet and visit, but I was always being teased by my plant pronunciation. I thought, I'm not having enough of this, because I am competitive, and I've always been competitive. And I decided, right, I wasn't going to fail an ident, and I was going to be the first student ever to get 100% in ident, and that had to be done in line with the International Code of Nomenclature, which is everything in its right place.
Yeah.
And I got £10 off the then botanist, a chap called John Elsley, who went on to the Arnold Arboretum. And Chris Brickell, the then director, said, will you stay as botanist? And I thought hard about that, but I thought, no, I'll get a pension at the end of all this, so I'll go into parks. And I went to a place called the Grotto, and and did landscape design and forestry and arboriculture, so I'd done quite a range of things.
And you saw most of your career out in the parks, the local authorities, but at the same time you were doing growing and exhibiting and flower arranging as well.
We always have kept the nursery. And in the early days of working in Bristol, I could have the nursery, but had to transfer it over to Jane because of, I used to call it the Poisons Act, but it wasn't. It meant that you couldn't have a conflict of interest at a senior management level. And I did things like landscaping motorways and all sorts of interesting things, and then got promoted up where I was director of sport as well as gardening and horticulture and all that sort of thing, and was promoted well above my natural ability, and was able to take early retirement, having done about 39 years and about 7 different jobs with the city. And I always believed very much in community horticulture. I've seen the effect. I was out in Bristol the night of the St Paul's riots, and I saw the impact of not having good green space, and dedicated a lot of my time in Bristol with a team of wonderful people, I should add, landscape architects and garden people and the staff, the parks department, but with the support of the councillors, who were a very switched on bunch. We planted over 1 million trees in Bristol, which was fantastic. They're still there to this day.
Well, you're also now heavily involved with the RHS, Britain in Bloom, judging at flower shows, prison judging. So what we'll do, we'll take a little break and then we'll come back and find out all about that, John.
That reminds me of John saying that he kept a diary from an early age. Have you written in hours lately?
I've been a bit lax.
I think we have.
We do a diary that we've had. It's a 5-year diary we've got, isn't it? And we've on.
We're on the third edition, so we're on about year 12. I think when we moved up to North Yorkshire, we said that we would start it off as we were creating the garden, and we'd start it off, and it's one of these 5-year diaries, so you've got the 5 years on one page. So it's only a little bit, so you're not having to write loads and loads.
Oh, so not 5 years on one page, but like, you can see the day for the different of the 5 years.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the 1st of January, 1st of January, 1st of January.
Yes.
For 5 years.
So it's sort of recording those 5 years, and we're on our third edition now, aren't we? Yeah. So it is lovely to look back on it, and it shows you the weather patterns as well, and what we were growing or planting, or then harvest time, what the weather's like. But it's also a really good way of just expressing yourself as well, isn't it? Because only you're going to see it. So if you're feeling a bit glum, or you just, I don't know, if things aren't going well either in the garden or just life in general, it is quite nice just to put a few words on a page.
Not being flippant, but honestly, I'm just thinking, if you are thinking, I've had a right day, I want to get it all down.
No, you'd need a little bit of paper to insert inside, I think. But even if it's just a sentence or two, and then you can think the next day you can look at that and think, okay, that wasn't such a good day, but today it's feeling a bit better.
It is. It is a good idea. I forget when we're busy or when we're away. I forget to take it with us, and then you suddenly get a gap in there. But we need to get back.
But
into
that doesn't matter, really,
no,
does it?
Doesn't.
You can just put Malvern Show or Tatton Flower Show, or you were away
retrospectively almost, and just go, last week we were doing this. Okay.
But I think from John's point of view, having them that you can go back to when he was a student. I mean, he's been in horticulture 60 plus years now, and it must be good to go back and look what you were doing, when you were a student in your early 20s.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when it was the COVID period and the first lockdown, I tried to do a bit of video every day just to sort of say, and with the idea of after this, I will put a video together. It got very samey very quickly, if I'm honest with you.
Yeah.
It was, after the 10th time I'd gone, there's not much traffic on the roads, and we're going out for our walk now, and it was a bit dull, to be honest. But I get the idea that, if you're writing in a book, it's about feelings, it's all else about what you're doing in the garden. It's okay.
Yeah,
It all ties in quite
I like
nicely.
to write in what we're sowing or what's looking good in the garden, so that you can then compare. Often there's a few weeks difference how plants grow. So yes, if you've got the time and the discipline to do it daily, it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter if you miss a bit.
No, it doesn't,
It's
does
fine.
it?
Yeah.
Good.
Only you're reading it, so it's... Yeah. Unless you're going to then publish it after your death.
I
we
don't
could
think anybody
make
wants to
a
publish
fortune.
ours. I don't think it would be that interesting, Mrs. Fish.
We want to know how your sprouts were doing
Exactly.
in 1982.
Yeah, I'm quite intrigued as to how your sprouts were doing in 1982. Coming up, we hear about gardening behind bars, and Martin's got some jobs to do in the garden. But first, we're going to answer a listener's question. But if you've got a question for the team, info@potsandtrowels is our email address. Drop us an email and we'll get right on it. So what's the question then?
Okay, well, this is from Robert Wren, who's been watching one of our videos about soft fruit pruning and planting. Now, he's a little bit confused, and after reading the question, I felt a bit confused as well. But he said he's just planted a fruit tree that's come straight from the grower. And if he just wants to check that if he cuts it down, then he realises he won't get fruit on it the year that he's planted it. But how does he get fruit the following year? I'm wondering if Robert's thinking he's got to cut it down in the same way every year.
Right, okay. I think the video, it referred to sort of soft fruit like... I think it was probably a black currant that we planted, wasn't it?
So you're propagating as well, I think.
You can then take some of the stems as hardwood cuttings. So it's good practice if you're planting, gooseberries or red currants or black currants. When you plant them, you prune them quite hard. And what it does, that encourages a strong root system, and then you get lots of strong new shoots. So it forms the framework of the bush, essentially. But you don't get any fruit in that first year. The second year you will get fruit. So I think your question is sort of saying, if you've got to keep then cutting it back, how do you get fruit in consequent years? So what you do once you've had that first crop of fruit is you prune out a percentage of the stems that have fruited, but you still leave a framework. So you're only probably pruning out a third of the wood in the first year after it's fruited to bulk it up and get a nice shape. Going forward after that, you would try and cut out some of the fruited wood every year. So you've got that old wood and new wood all mixed together. So it's only the first year that you do that hard prune when you've planted it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, one thing I would just point out is that video was a bit of a catch-all. It included red currants, black currants, white currants, gooseberries, and Robert doesn't actually specify which plant he's talking about.
Because he says a tree, which is, you wouldn't prune a tree always hard back. So
no, but I think he probably means
the bush.
Plant if it,
I suppose the reason I mention it is that I know that then the following year we actually did some separate videos, didn't we? So perhaps we could point people at there's one on each gooseberries and red currants, and we did some separate ones. So perhaps that would help if we point people in that direction. We'll put that in the show notes.
Okay. Yeah, good idea.
Right, I think there's a little revelation about John and somebody famous in the next part. Should we have a listen?
So Britain in Bloom celebrates 60 years this year, and you've been involved with them for quite a number of years, haven't you, John?
When it started 60 years ago, 2 years after that, I joined Bath City Council and worked with a wonderful man called Fred Dorr. There was a Councillor Berry in charge of parks in those days, and that was Mary Berry's dad.
Really?
Yeah, astonishing. I was working with Mary last year, and I told her about that, and there's great affinity. What a lovely lady, and great fun. And in those days, it was between two cities, Bath and Aberdeen, and the late David Welsh and Fred Dorr were great friends, but incredibly competitive. So I was involved then. I introduced it into Bristol, but Bristol is a big city, and we got involved with that. But I eventually became chairman of South West in Bloom, and a judge, and then got onto the national panel, and I was vice chairman of the national panel of Britain in Bloom for a number of years. We changed it. We changed it from largely a floral competition to more a community and an environmental competition. And I was asked by the RHS if I'd create the 50th anniversary garden, which we did at Hampton Court with a team of wonderful people. Not just me. I owe such a lot to all the people I work with, including people like you, Martin, who does just as much as I do. But then this year's been very special because I was asked to do the 60th anniversary gardens at Chelsea and at Hampton Court. And my son, who trained in horticulture at Reading University, runs a business in New Zealand, and he came over to help, and daughter did all the planting. It's a family affair,
Absolutely,
really.
which is lovely to see. And it was an amazing garden that you created and designed, built it. You grew lots of the plants for it back at the nursery at home. So it was, like you say, a real family effort. It got lots of coverage worldwide, didn't it?
Well, it did. I was very fortunate to meet King Charles on the first day of Chelsea and show him around the garden, and I was getting emails from my friends in Mexico, friends in Australia, friends in New Zealand. Even my granddaughters in New Zealand said, "Granddad, we've seen you on the telly."
I can relate to that, having two New Zealand granddaughters. So yes, exactly. So that's a great thing. And you're still doing things at the flower shows. I mean, I know you told me you were going to retire, but I don't think you'll ever retire from the flower shows.
No,
Jon.
I don't think I will. And I've had a serious thought. I'm going to do different things. I'm quite passionate about community horticulture and really involving and getting people involved more and more. We can grow our own veg. We import so much stuff from all around the world, and really we ought to get back to gardening. We need a Dig for Victory campaign almost again.
Absolutely, yeah, sort of kickstart it all going, don't we, to get people growing, definitely.
We become very much couch potatoes, and I want us to be growers of potatoes.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, that's right. And the RHS is something, again, you've heavily been involved with, obviously doing show gardens, but you're sort of on council, you've been on the council, you were on council for many years, and now a vice president of the Royal Horticultural Society.
Yeah, it's quite an honour. I believe that if you're going to put, when I actually took time out and left Bristol City Council, I decided to become an exhibitor, but I took a conscious decision not to jump into things too quickly. And I took a decision to spend a third of my time doing charitable work. And I mean that, and I do it. And in my 10 years on council, I like to think that I put in at least a day or a day and a half a week, either in London or in doing stuff regionally. The RHS is a wonderful organisation. It can change people's lives. I think it's got a major potential in terms of communities, particularly for young people in urban situations, and I really hope that that will go forward. It is a charity and it makes money, but it does put money back into communities. Has some wonderful gardens where I trained at Wisley. You've got the ones that you're a garden advisor to, like Allett.
Yeah.
And the best is yet to come. It's non-political, and I think that's a good point. Keep politics out of gardening. But it's about beautiful environments as well. I was very touched a year ago when I went to see one of the first gardens that had been repurposed from Chelsea. And I met some children, and the children said, "Mister," in their London accents, we don't have any garden, we just got a balcony. What a shame. So the RHS is very keen on that. It's making the health, GP referral links and so on and so forth. But the best is yet to come. I'm a great believer, Martin, as you well know, in don't bring me a problem, bring me a solution.
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
there's so many, anybody can sit back and identify a problem, but the key people in life are the people that do something about it.
Absolutely right, absolutely. And one of the other things we've got to touch on, because I mentioned it in part one, is prisons. You've been in and out of prison an awful lot over the last few years.
I was offered the chance to be an assessor of the Windlesham Trophy. Lord Windlesham is a wonderful prison reformer.
Oh, so you've been there working, not for other reasons.
No, and well, not yet. I've got to be good. And the interesting thing about that, it goes with my theme of career teachers saying perhaps, oh, you're too bright for horticulture. Never write anybody off. Give everybody an opportunity. And yeah, there are those that will never reform, but the majority of prison work now is based on reforming characters and giving people the opportunity. And the Windlesham Trophy is about assessing prison gardens. I have met people with no hope, and they've said, we've created hope, we've actually changed our lives by doing gardening. We forget our environment and we forget our troubles. One of the big issues in today's world is mental health problems. You don't get as many gardeners with mental health problems because they're actively enjoying the outdoors, they're enjoying learning about plants, and they're healthy eating as well. That's not to say that people with mental health problems don't exist, because of course they do, and the pressures are great on people in society nowadays. But take a chance, do a bit of gardening, and it will change your life.
Absolutely. And you get the chance to go around lots of these prisons. They've got some fantastic gardens, haven't they? Because they're growing not only ornamental plants and maintaining the gardens, but they're growing so much that they're eating inside the prison.
Well, yeah, I think the theory is that if possible, grow all the veg and teach the people that are going to have new careers once they get out into chefing and gardening. And yes, it's so important that you can do that. So grow your own is important in prisons as well as out in the community. The future's great, and I think really if we can, people like you and I, you're dedicated to it as well. It's about spreading the message.
It is, yeah, getting as many people involved as possible. And just to finish off, John, right at the very beginning, you mentioned, gardening with your granddad on the allotment, and he grew dahlias. You are still very, very much involved in dahlias. All these years later, you are a world leader in dahlias. So it's obviously stuck with you, hasn't it?
Well, it's sad, really. I knew 6,000 cultivars at one stage, so I can't remember them all now. But yeah, I'm into that. I think fashion's changed. I'm really into biodiversity and using plants that pollinate. Dahlias are wonderful for that. I've been to Mexico a few times, where they come from.
Yeah.
Always remember, if you want to learn anything about plants, first of all, find out where it comes from, and then you plant it in a similar location. A wonderful flower, and Prince Philip of Spain thought it was the source of cochineal, but of course we know it's a beetle. But they're lovely stories. The Mayans used to grow them, and perhaps plants will solve many of our biological and health problems in the future. Perhaps dahlias may have a role in that.
I'm sure they will, and I know you're still a big dahlia grower, so that's stuck with you all those years.
The National Dahlia Society, like many of the plant societies in the United Kingdom, is run by amateurs. And we have some wonderful exhibition growers, but yeah, give somebody... I've got a lovely story that I'll tell you very quickly. I wore suits into an office every day. I used to start at 7 o'clock, and some nights, because I used to have to run a big theatre as part and parcel of my role, and I sometimes never got home till 11 o'clock at night. If I ever carried a bunch of flowers into the office, people used to say hello to me. If I didn't have a bunch of flowers, they didn't say hello. Which there's something in that. Never forget the power of flowers.
Absolutely, and you haven't, John. Thank you very much for giving some time to have a chat. I know you're very busy, you've got to rush off and do something else here at the show, and we'll catch up at another show somewhere and have another chat, I think.
Well, thanks for everything you do, Martin. You and Jill are fantastic in what you do. I wish you well, and anything I can help you with, I'm more than happy to do.
Thanks, John.
Flower power. Never underestimate flower power. The hippies were right after all. Now, there is something about that, isn't it? If somebody carries some flowers and they're fragrant and they're, attractive to look at, that's fabulous, isn't it?
Yeah, and it doesn't need to be an expensive bouquet either, does it? In fact, I'll tell you a little secret now. Well, it's not a secret, but from our dim and distant past, when I first met Martin, he said that he would pick me a bunch of flowers out of the garden every week.
Okay.
Forever.
I just have to
I think it happened.
To look back through my diary to see
twice.
when I made that entry.
Twice that happened. You see.
Oh. So I know a gardener who doesn't like flowers. He doesn't think you should pick them off the plants.
A lot of gardeners don't. I've got a friend that won't. The most she'll pick off is a tiny little bit to talk about. But I think if you've got them in the garden, bring them in the house.
Well, you don't let me pick the tulips.
No, because we don't
tulips
plant enough. I know, but I like to see them in the garden.
Yeah.
If we'd got spare room and I could plant a block in the veg plot that were just for cutting as a cutting garden, which is what we used to do, we haven't got room here, then yes. But in the garden, no.
One other thing John said was about the idea of let's dig potatoes, not be couch potatoes, and I think that's that's a really nice thought, isn't it? That we should be out there, getting the fresh air and not sitting on our sofas watching Monty Don.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you mentioned the Dig for Victory as well, didn't he? Getting people out, because the schools used to do gardening, and I know primary schools still do, but it's not the same. People don't grow veg like they used to do 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I think it might come back. Allotments are so popular, people are growing a bit more, but there's great satisfaction of growing your own. You know how it's grown, you know it's free of chemicals if you choose to do that, and the taste is amazing. And of course, John also mentioned prisons where they grow a huge amount of veg. And John is one of the judges of this Windlesham Trophy, which is an annual award that's given to the best prison garden in the UK.
So do all prisons take part, or do they have to apply for it to take part?
I think most prisons have a garden.
Right.
I've been to Hull, up in south East Yorkshire. They've got a garden. They've got glass houses, polytunnels. I think what happens is they all have the garden, and then the head of horticulture within the prison services shortlists them, so they put forward the best of the best.
And does that produce get used in the kitchens as well?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it's used. So I mean, a lot of what they do is to make the prison more decorative. They have little ornamental gardens, places where prisoners can go and sit and sort of relax. But they also are productive in the fact that they grow fruit and vegetables. So John chairs the panel. There are 3 that go round and judge the shortlist, and then they pick the top prison for horticulture.
And some of those prisoners will be quite experienced gardeners, won't they? They've
They
maybe
will.
had allotments on the outside, and sort of they can use their skills already to then teach and sort of help.
Yes,
new
they will.
gardeners.
There'll be new ones as well,
Yeah,
complete novices as it were. But they will have instructors. They have horticulturally qualified instructors that are teaching them as well. Whether they can do a qualification, that I'm not sure. But I mean, the winner of this year's Windlesham Trophy has gone to a prison in Nottinghamshire, literally down the road from you, Sean, at Watton.
Near Bingham. Yeah, I know. Yeah,
That's right. So it's only a matter of miles from where you live. And they grow about 1/2 ton of fruit and vegetables a year.
Wow.
And what they don't use in their prison is sent to other prisons to feed the prisoners.
Okay.
So they
good.
aren't completely self-sufficient, but they grow an awful lot of their own produce.
Yeah.
He mentioned that he can't even remember, but he used to be able to recall 6,000 cultivar. How long has he been gardening? Cultivar of Dahlia, wasn't it?
Many years.
Yeah, he's actually 112. No, I don't know his exact age, but he's well into his 70s, and he's obviously been gardening since he was a teenager. So
At this point, I'm just going to interrupt and give a shout out to Jane, his wife, who he mentions. I think Jane is long suffering, bless her.
But no, John is an amazing chap. He's done so much in his life, and he does genuinely do an awful lot for charity in the community. He's all about getting the community's gardening. In fact, in recognition of that, the RHS awarded him a few years ago the VMH, which is the Victoria Medal of Honour, which is the RHS, the Royal Horticultural Society's highest award and accolade for people in horticulture. And there are only 63 awards at any one time.
That's very specific then. Tell us
is.
why.
Well, it's the Victoria Medal of Honour was started in 1897. With the permission of Queen Victoria. And then after she died, it was decided that she'd reigned for 63 years, so that would be the maximum awards that would be given. So some years they don't award it, because obviously it has to rely on somebody dying, sadly, before one becomes vacant to give to somebody else.
Gosh.
So yeah, it is. John is one of 63 people in the world. That have
It's
got
the
this.
world. It's not just Britain.
Yeah, I think it probably is the UK, to be fair, because there are other awards for people
That
around.
would make sense.
But yes, even so, it's still the odds of getting one. Pretty
No,
good.
it's good.
So he's a great chap.
Fabulous. Well, we should probably just change gear slightly and get on to jobs we could be doing in the garden this week.
Yeah, absolutely, Sean. If you've got any tender plants outside, certainly here in England, it's getting a bit cooler. We've had a little bit of frost, nothing too much yet, but we're getting into October, middle of October. So if you've got anything that's tender that needs a little bit of frost protection, I'm thinking of things like agapanthus, if you've got them in pots, or anything that isn't totally hardy, then either put them somewhere very sheltered against a south facing wall, or if you've got a cold greenhouse, put them in there, or a bright shed or a conservatory, just to give them that little bit of winter protection. So that's something you can be doing. House plants, again, we've got to the time of the year when the central heating is clicking on, or you're lighting the log burner of an evening when it turns cool. So we tend to get a very dry atmosphere in the house because of the artificial heat. So first thing is make sure any of your lovely foliage houseplants aren't in a draft. So stand them in some good light, because the light levels are going to drop as we get into winter, and they don't go anywhere too hot, so don't put them above a radiator or close to an open fire. So just choose a position with good light and a fairly constant temperature if you can, and once a week take them to the sink and get a little mister and just mist them with water. It just creates a bit of humidity around them and freshens them up and keeps the foliage nice and glossy.
Some people would say put a little pot of water. If you've got a cluster of houseplants, put a little pot of water.
You could do, if you've got them in trays, you could put a bit of gravel in the bottom of the tray, a little bit of water, but you don't want them standing in water, but that then will evaporate and give them that humidity around them. And finally, all the summer colour has gone from the garden now, so get yourself a pot, fill it with some compost, maybe go to the garden centre and get a few dwarf shrubs or a bit of trading ivy and a few little things like the little pretty violas with these lovely little delicate flowers, or primulas that you can plant in there, a few bulbs maybe, and that will look good through the autumn and the winter. Just
for those of you listening, Martin rustling noises that he's showing some violas to the camera. So if you go over to YouTube and watch this, you should be able to see those.
They are pretty. Keep deadheading though.
Keep deadheading, and they'll look great through, right the way through till springtime. So we need that bit of colour in the winter to cheer us up on a gloomy day.
Sounds good. Yeah, well, we've still been wandering out at lunchtime. Me and my wife both work from home most of the time, so we both kind of try and walk out into the garden, and we will do as long as we possibly can. And it's nice anyway.
Make the most of it.
Marley's getting us out there as well, so
good. Yeah, well, that's the good thing with having a dog. You've got to take them a walk, so it gets you out, Sean. Whatever the weather, you'll be out there.
Absolutely.
And Marley will love it. Good. I think that's it then, isn't it, for this week?
I think it probably is. Yeah, I think it is.
I think so, yeah.
So shall we do it all again next week?
Ready for next week.
Right.
Brilliant. Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you then. Bye.
Bye.
Watch the videos on YouTube or Facebook, follow us on Instagram, Twitter or X, and subscribe to the podcast and never miss a thing. For more information, go to potsandtrowels.com.